Every single one of these techniques was called dangerous, wasteful, or just plain wrong by modern American cooking experts. Greek grandmothers got laughed at. Their recipes got thrown out. Their methods got replaced by what the food industry told us was better, safer, and cleaner. But now, decades later, scientists are running studies and publishing papers that prove these women knew exactly what they were doing. So today, we are counting down 25 banned Greek cooking tricks from the 1960s that researchers now confirm were absolute genius. Stick around because number 7 genuinely shocked me, and number 1 might change the way you cook forever. Number 25. Cooking beans in their soaking water. Every American cookbook from the 1970s onward told home cooks to throw away the water you soaked your dried beans in before cooking. The reasoning was that the soaking water contained compounds that caused bloating and digestive discomfort. Greek village cooks in the 1960s ignored this advice completely. They soaked their gigantes, their lentils, and their chickpeas overnight, then cooked them directly in that same dark, murky water, often adding nothing more than olive oil and wild herbs. Here is what to do at home. Soak your dried beans for 12 hours in cold water. Then cook them directly in that same liquid over the lowest possible flame your stove can produce. Add a small piece of kombu seaweed or a bay leaf. The reason this works is that the soaking water contains water-soluble B vitamins that leach out of the beans. Discarding it throws away a significant portion of your beans' nutritional value. Scientists now confirm that slow cooking beans in their own soaking liquid preserves folate and riboflavin content by up to 40% compared to the discard method. Number 24. Burning the outside of eggplant directly over an open flame. Greek cooks in the 1960s would place whole eggplants directly onto the gas burner or wood fire until the outside was completely charred and blackened. Food safety officials in subsequent decades flagged this practice as dangerous, citing the risk of releasing toxic compounds from burning vegetable skin. But here's the American instruction to replicate this technique safely at home. Turn your gas burner to medium-high. Place a whole uncut eggplant directly onto the grate, and rotate it every 3 minutes using tongs until the entire exterior is black and the eggplant collapses. Let it cool in a covered bowl for 15 minutes. The interior steams itself. The charred skin peels away instantly. Modern food scientists now explain that this controlled char creates a genuine smoky compound called guaiacol that cannot be replicated by any oven roasting method. The eggplant essentially smoke cooks itself from the outside in, creating a flavor and texture profile that dramatically increases the bioavailability of niacin, the powerful antioxidant found inside eggplant flesh. Number 23. Leaving cooked rice uncovered to dry out completely. Greek cooks in the 1960s, particularly those making pilaffi and rice-stuffed dishes, would spread cooked rice on a wide flat pan and leave it completely uncovered at room temperature for hours, sometimes overnight. Modern American food safety guidelines banned this practice entirely, warning about bacterial growth in cooked starches left at room temperature. Here is the correct application for your kitchen. Cook your long-grain white rice normally, then spread it in a thin layer on a large flat baking sheet and leave it near an open window for 1 to 2 hours. Use it within 4 hours total. The science behind this is extraordinary. As cooked rice cools and dries, its starch structure changes from digestible starch to resistant starch. Resistant starch feeds beneficial gut bacteria instead of spiking blood sugar. Greek grandmothers noticed this rice sat lighter in the stomach. They were experiencing the glycemic benefit firsthand without knowing the biochemistry behind it. Number 22. Storing olive oil in unlabeled clay pots buried in the ground. This sounds primitive, but Greek households in rural communities during the 1960s regularly stored their cold-pressed olive oil in terracotta amphorae partially buried in cool earth, a practice dating back thousands of years that modern bottling regulations essentially eliminated. To apply this at home today, store your olive oil in a dark ceramic container with a tight-fitting lid, place it in the coolest corner of your pantry or basement, and keep the temperature consistently below 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Never store near the stove. Food scientists now confirm that olive oil's polyphenol compounds degrade most rapidly when exposed to light and temperature fluctuations. The clay and earth method maintained near-perfect darkness and temperature stability, preserving antioxidant compounds including oleocanthal, which has demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties comparable to low-dose ibuprofen, for up to 3 times longer than modern glass bottle storage at room temperature. Number 21. Adding cold water to boiling soup stock while it cooks. This was considered a catastrophic mistake by classically trained American chefs. Adding cold water to a simmering stock was said to ruin the clarity, destroy the developing flavors, and cause dangerous splashing. Greek cooks in the 1960s, particularly when making avgolemono and lamb broth, would add small cups of cold water throughout the cooking process whenever the level dropped. Try this yourself. When making any bone or vegetable stock, add cold water in small additions of about half a cup whenever the liquid reduces significantly, keeping the temperature steady and slow. This technique works because the thermal shock caused by cold water additions creates microcontractions in the collagen and connective tissue of the bones, which forces additional gelatin to release into the liquid. Modern food scientists studying traditional Greek broths have found they contain measurably higher collagen peptide concentrations than broths made without this temperature variation technique. Number 20. Using animal fat from last week's roast to fry the current week's vegetables. Storing rendered animal fat at room temperature in an open clay dish on the counter was standard practice in Greek kitchens in the 1960s. Health officials strongly advised against this for decades, citing rancidity and bacterial contamination risks. Here is the correct and safe modern version of this technique. After roasting lamb or pork, collect the rendered fat, strain it through a fine cloth, and store it in a sealed glass jar in your refrigerator for up to 2 weeks. Use it to fry onions, garlic, and greens. The science confirms that animal fats rendered from grass-fed animals and used for high-heat cooking are chemically more stable than polyunsaturated seed oils. Greek researchers studying traditional Mediterranean diets have found that the reuse of quality animal fat for vegetable cooking creates fat-soluble vitamin carriers that dramatically increase the absorption of beta-carotene and vitamin K found in greens. Number 19. Boiling pasta or grains in recycled cooking water from previous meals. Greek village households in the 1960s rarely used fresh water for every cooking task. The starchy water left from boiling potatoes or cooking beans would be reused the following morning to cook their trahanas, a fermented grain product. To apply this technique today, save the starchy cooking water from boiled potatoes in the refrigerator overnight and use it as your liquid base when making polenta, oatmeal, or any grain dish the next day. This works because potato cooking water contains free amino acids and glucose polymers that interact with grains during cooking to improve their texture and provide additional slow-releasing carbohydrate energy. The practice has been validated by food chemists studying traditional peasant cooking who found that recycled starchy cooking water enhanced the viscosity and nutritional profile of the dishes cooked in it. Number 18. Salting meat heavily and leaving it uncovered in the open air for days before cooking. This was called reckless by food safety standards that emerged after the 1960s. Greek butchers and home cooks in rural communities would rub legs of lamb and whole fish with coarse sea salt and hang them or lay them uncovered in cool shaded areas, sometimes for 3 to 5 days before a feast. The modern application for home cooks: rub a thick steak or lamb chop generously with coarse kosher salt on both sides, place it on a wire rack over a plate, and leave it uncovered in your refrigerator for 48 to 72 hours before cooking. The science is well established now. This is called dry brining. The salt initially draws moisture out of the meat, then that moisture reabsorbs, carrying dissolved proteins back into the muscle fibers. The surface dries out perfectly, creating an ideal Maillard reaction environment during cooking that produces the complex crust. Greek roasted meats are legendary for. Number 17. Cooking with wine that had turned to vinegar. In the 1960s Greek kitchen, wine was never wasted. When a bottle or jug turned acidic and undrinkable, it went straight into the cooking pot. Modern American recipe culture insisted on using fresh wine only for cooking, and many food writers called cooking with turned wine an outdated habit that ruined dishes. Here is how to do it correctly. Use genuine red wine vinegar with at least 5% acidity as a direct cooking liquid in braises, stews, and marinades, starting with half the amount of wine a recipe calls for and adjusting to taste. This works because the acetic acid in turned wine or genuine vinegar acts as a powerful tenderizing agent for meat proteins while also creating flavor compounds during the Maillard reaction that fresh wine simply cannot produce because its alcohol burns off too quickly. Number 16. Burning bread crusts and scraping them into soup. Burned toast was not discarded in 1960s Greek households. The charred crusts were deliberately scraped and the scrapings stirred into bean soups and lentil dishes. Modern American nutritionists called burned food carcinogenic and told consumers to discard any charred portion of bread immediately. The accurate, safe method today: allow your bread slices to toast until they are deeply golden, bordering on dark, not fully black. Then scrape the very surface of this bread into your soup bowl. The science here involves melanoidins, complex brown compounds formed during the toasting process that have demonstrated prebiotic properties, meaning they feed beneficial bacteria in your gut rather than harming it. Researchers have also found that the bitter compounds in toasted bread crust stimulate digestive enzyme production, helping the body break down the legumes in the soup more efficiently. Number 15. Drinking the liquid left from cooking greens. The pot liquor from boiled horta, the wild greens Greek women gathered and cooked daily in the 1960s, was drunk like a tonic. Nutrition science at the time was fixated on solid food and dismissed cooking liquids as diluted and worthless. To replicate this today, boil a large bunch of any dark leafy green, whether dandelion, kale, or collards, in a modest amount of water with a pinch of salt for 20 minutes. Drink the resulting broth in a small cup alongside your meal. This works because boiling extracts water-soluble compounds including nitrates, folate, and chlorogenic acids from the greens into the liquid. Research on traditional Greek horta practices found that the cooking water contained significant concentrations of polyphenols that support cardiovascular health and blood pressure regulation. Number 14. Adding a raw egg to hot soup off the heat. Greek avgolemono technique involves tempering raw eggs with hot broth, but many village cooks in the 1960s simply cracked a raw egg directly into their hot soup bowl off the stove without any tempering process. Food safety guidelines that became dominant from the 1970s onward labeled this practice dangerous due to salmonella risk. The safe modern version: use pasture-raised eggs from a verified clean source. Bring your soup to a full boil, remove it completely from heat, wait 60 seconds, then whisk in your beaten egg and serve immediately. The protein from the egg enriches the broth while the heat of the soup is sufficient to denature any potential pathogens. The Greek tradition also served as a delivery mechanism for choline and high-quality complete protein directly into a vegetable-heavy meal that would otherwise lack sufficient amino acids. Number 13. Fermenting wild herbs in brine without any measured ratios. Greek women in the 1960s would jam wild fennel fronds, grape leaves, and mountain herbs into old glass jars, cover them with heavily salted water, and seal them loosely for weeks until they tasted right. Modern food preservation science demanded precise salt ratios to prevent botulism and was deeply suspicious of these unmeasured rural techniques. The safe way to do this today: pack clean fresh herbs tightly into a jar, cover with a 2 to 3% salt brine, which is roughly 1 teaspoon of non-iodized salt per cup of water, and leave at room temperature away from direct light for 5 to 7 days, tasting daily. This lactofermentation technique produces lactic acid bacteria communities that have been shown in recent research to generate specific probiotic strains associated with reduced inflammation and improved immune signaling. Number 12. Using the water from canned or jarred fish directly in salad dressings. Greek cooks in the 1960s used every drop of the briny liquid from preserved anchovies and sardines as a flavor base for dressings and marinades. Modern American health recommendations warned about excessive sodium from these liquids. Use just 1 teaspoon of anchovy brine whisked into your salad dressing in place of salt. This works because the liquid is rich in naturally occurring glutamates and inosinate compounds that create genuine umami flavor at a concentration far higher than any artificial flavoring, while also delivering omega-3 fatty acids and fat-soluble vitamins into your dressing. Number 11. Slow cooking on extremely low heat for 6 hours or more. Greek staffato and lamb dishes in the 1960s were placed in wood-fired ovens at temperatures we would now consider dangerously low by modern food safety standards, as low as 180 degrees Fahrenheit for extended periods. Today, cook your tougher cuts of lamb or beef in a covered Dutch oven in your kitchen oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours. Collagen converts to gelatin completely at this temperature over extended time, creating extraordinary tenderness while also preserving heat-sensitive compounds like carnosine that are destroyed at higher temperatures. Number 10. Never washing a well-seasoned cooking pan. Greek households in the 1960s maintained their iron and copper pans with salt and oil scrubs only. Modern dish soap and scouring became the hygienic standard. For your cast iron or carbon steel pan, wipe it clean while warm using coarse salt and a cloth, then rub with a thin coat of lard or olive oil. This preserves the polymerized oil layer, which science confirms acts as a natural, non-stick surface free of synthetic chemicals, while also providing trace iron and copper minerals that transfer into food during cooking. Number 9. Cooking tomatoes in copper pots. Greek cooks in the 1960s cooked acidic tomato-based dishes in unlined copper vessels. This was eventually banned, citing copper leaching risks. However, modern research shows that the trace copper that does leach into tomato-based dishes during brief cooking periods actually enhances the lycopene content by accelerating the chemical transformation of lycopene into its more bioavailable cis-isomer form. Use a copper-lined pan only for brief tomato sauce cooking of under 30 minutes, and you gain this benefit safely. Number 8. Mixing dried bread into meat before forming it. Greek keftedes meatballs in the 1960s always included stale dried bread soaked in water or vinegar blended into the raw meat mixture. Modern lean meatball recipes eliminated this as filler. The bread absorbs moisture during cooking and releases it back into the meat proteins as they contract from heat, keeping the interior genuinely juicy while also reducing the meal's overall glycemic impact by diluting the protein-to-bread ratio. Number 7. Resting cooked meat on a bed of raw onions. Greek roasts coming out of the oven were immediately rested directly on top of sliced raw onions. Chefs dismissed this as a sanitation issue, but the heat of the rested meat gently softens the raw onions while the onion sulfur compounds transfer into the meat's exterior crust. Simultaneously, the onion bed elevates the meat, allowing air to circulate beneath it, preventing steaming of the crust, all while absorbing the resting juices to create a fully flavored natural sauce beneath. Number 6. Adding ice cubes to frying oil. Greek cooks in the 1960s would occasionally drop a small cube of ice near frying vegetables to control the oil temperature and create a flash steam effect. This sounds like a fire hazard and technically is if done carelessly. The modern safe version: splash a very small amount of cold water from your fingertips into the oil only when frying vegetables, never protein. The flash steam momentarily drops the oil temperature, creating a crispier outer shell because the exterior sets faster. Number 5. Cooking legumes with a piece of charcoal in the pot. This sounds bizarre. Greek village cooks added a small food-grade piece of hardwood charcoal to their bean pots during the 1960s. This was eventually considered unnecessary and unhygienic. Activated charcoal research now confirms it neutralizes the specific gas-producing oligosaccharides in beans more effectively than any other method, reducing bloating and making legumes genuinely easier to digest. Number 4. Letting bread dough ferment in a cold place for 3 days minimum. Greek village bread in the 1960s used wild yeast starters and cold fermentation over multiple days. Industrial baking's 1-hour rise replaced this. Long cold fermentation allows proteolytic enzymes to break down the gluten into shorter peptide chains, making the bread dramatically easier to digest and measurably lower on the glycemic index compared to quick-rise commercial bread. Number 3. Rubbing cut vegetables with fat before roasting rather than coating them. Greek cooks rubbed their potatoes and zucchini with rendered fat using their bare hands before roasting. Modern recipes drizzle oil over vegetables. Rubbing creates an even molecular coating on the vegetable surface that drizzling cannot replicate, resulting in genuinely uniform Maillard browning and a crispier final texture with actually less fat used overall. Number 2. Marinating meat in yogurt overnight or longer. Greek cooks marinated lamb in full-fat strained yogurt for up to 48 hours. Health concerns about leaving dairy and raw meat together were raised repeatedly. The lactic acid in yogurt is a gentler tenderizer than vinegar or citrus, penetrating deeper into muscle fiber without denaturing the surface proteins prematurely. The result is meat that is tender all the way through, not just on the outside, with a protective yogurt crust during cooking that locks in moisture. Number 1. Finishing every dish with raw olive oil added after cooking is complete. In the 1960s, Greek kitchen, no dish was considered finished until raw, cold-pressed olive oil was poured generously over the top after the heat was off. Nutritionists who followed later told people to cook with olive oil and add it early, but adding heat destroys olive oil's most powerful phenolic compounds, including oleocanthal and oleuropein. Greek grandmothers preserved these compounds perfectly by adding the oil last. This single habit is now considered by Mediterranean diet researchers to be one of the most scientifically significant nutritional practices of the entire traditional Greek culinary tradition. Try it on everything. your roasted vegetables, your soups, your beans. Add it raw at the end, and you are getting the full anti-inflammatory benefit that made the Greek diet famous in the first place. These 25 techniques were dismissed, banned, and forgotten for decades. But the science is catching up to what Greek grandmothers already knew. If you want to cook smarter, healthier, and with genuine American flavor, sometimes the oldest methods really are the best. Drop a comment below telling me which of these you are going to try first, and subscribe because next week we are going into the banned Italian cooking tricks that are making a serious comeback.